The tragedy of Mike Tyson is not that he fell. The tragedy is that he got back up every time, on the canvas, in prison, on the sidewalk where cocaine was breakfast, and every time the world only shoved him back into the next fight. We remember the knockout of Trevor Berbick, the WBC champion, going down while a 20-year and 4-month-old kid became the youngest heavyweight champion in history, a record that has stood for nearly 40 years. We remember the first man to unify all 3 heavyweight belts, WBC, WBA, IBF. We remember 37-0 undefeated, 44 knockouts and 50 wins, an 88% KO rate. We remember Michael Spinks, the undefeated lineal heavyweight champion, stepping into the ring and 91 seconds later lying on the canvas while the entire Atlantic City arena hadn't even had time to sit down. Iron Mike, the baddest man on the planet, Kid Dynamite. But behind every 30-second knockout lived a little boy that no highlight reel ever showed. The little boy who was bullied in Brownsville for being small and having a stutter, arrested 40 times before age 13, lost his father at 2, lost his mother at 16, lost the only mentor he ever had at 19, and when everyone had left or died, that little boy had to face alone the one thing no punch could knock out, himself. That little boy would be sentenced to 6 years in prison for rape and serve 3 years in an Indiana prison. He would bite off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear in front of hundreds of millions of people, because inside the most perfect destruction machine in boxing history was a child screaming that no one could hear. He earned over $400 million, then went bankrupt with $23 million in debt, kept 3 Bengal tigers in a 52-room mansion, was so heavily addicted to cocaine that he told the police straight out, "I use it whenever I get it." He lost a 4-year-old daughter in an accident, and at age 56 he would sit in a wheelchair at Miami airport. The same body that had knocked out 44 grown men, now unable to walk across the terminal on its own. The punches never told the whole story. They never told how a little boy was turned into a fighting machine before he was ever taught how to be a human being. Before we follow that little boy from the sidewalks of Brownsville to the lights of Las Vegas and then into the darkness of an Indiana prison, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Not for Iron Mike, but for Michael, the little boy that Iron Mike hid inside for half a century. To understand why that machine destroyed every opponent and destroyed itself at the same time, you have to go back to where it all began. Brownsville, Brooklyn, the 1970s. A place where if you didn't belong to a gang, you belonged on the victim list. Michael Gerard Tyson was born on June 30, 1966, at Cumberland Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. The third child in a family of 3 siblings, older brother Rodney, older sister Denise, and Michael. His father, Jimmy Kirkpatrick, originally from Griertown, North Carolina, came to Brooklyn to make a living, but never made anything of himself. He left the family when Mike was 2 years old, around 1968, and vanished from the lives of his 3 children, as if they had never existed. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't forced by circumstance. This was a man who chose to walk out the door. Mike has no memories of his father, no specific farewell moment to resent, no clear face in his head, only the empty chair at the dinner table that no one ever sat in, and an absence that sometimes hurts more than betrayal, because betrayal at least gives you someone to be angry at. His mother, Lorna Smith Tyson, born in 1937, raised 3 children alone in a Brownsville tenement apartment on welfare checks that weren't enough to buy food for the week. She wasn't a steel wall holding the roof up. She was a woman drowning who was still trying to keep 3 kids above water, and the water in Brownsville was always rising. Brownsville in the 1970s wasn't a neighborhood. It was a battlefield. Highest crime rate in New York. Gangs controlling every block. Drugs sold openly on the corners of Pitkin Avenue, and children either learned to fight or learned to get beaten before they learned to read. Mike was small, chubby, stuttered, wore thick glasses, the complete opposite of the Iron Mike the world would know 15 years later. In Brownsville, that image was an open invitation for bullies, older kids from street gangs like the Jolly Stompers, stole his money, stole his things, beat up the fat, stuttering kid every day, and every day he swallowed his tears and went back to the dark apartment where his mother was working the night shift, and no one asked how many times he'd been beaten that day. Then there were the pigeons. In the middle of Brownsville where nothing belonged to him. No father, no money, no safety. Mike found pigeons on the roof of the apartment building and started raising them, caring for them, talking to them in his stuttering voice that no bird ever mocked. They were the only creatures on Earth that completely belonged to little Michael Tyson, until the day an older kid, a member of a local street gang, grabbed one of his pigeons, looked him straight in the eye, and wrung its neck. Mike fought back for the first time in his life, and in the moment his fist hit that kid's face, he discovered what Brownsville teaches every child sooner or later, that violence is the only language that makes the world listen. And the fat, stuttering kid spoke that language better than anyone else his age on those sidewalks. From then on, Mike was no longer the one getting bullied. Mike became the bully, then the petty thief, then the name the local cops wrote down in their black book. By age 13, around 1979, Mike had been arrested nearly 40 times. Theft, robbery, fighting, vandalism, not because he was born a criminal, but because in Brownsville the line between surviving and committing a crime is thinner than a razor blade. And when no one shows you where the line is, you step over it every day without even knowing. He was sent to Tryon School for Boys, a reformatory in Johnstown, New York, a place that locked up the kid society had already given up on trying to fix. But at Tryon, a former boxer named Bobby Stewart, a counselor at the school who had fought as a middleweight with a respectable record, saw something no one had ever seen in the fat, stuttering kid from Brownsville: unusually fast hands, terrifying explosive power, and pure fighting instinct that no school could teach. Stewart started teaching Mike how to hit the heavy bag, basic footwork, how to keep his guard, and after only a few weeks, Stewart knew this kid was way beyond his ability to train. Stewart called Cus D'Amato, the legendary 73-year-old trainer living in Catskill, New York, who had already made 2 heavyweight champions, Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres, and told D'Amato he had to meet this kid. D'Amato came to Tryon, watched Mike spar, and immediately said 3 words to Stewart that would completely change the history of the heavyweight division. "That's a champion." D'Amato took Mike home to Catskill, the old house on the hill where he lived with his companion, Camille Ewald, living together, eating together, training together every day at the Catskill Boxing Club that D'Amato ran. When Mike's mother, Lorna Tyson, died of cancer in 1982, Mike was 16. His father had been gone for 14 years, and now his mother was gone too. D'Amato became his legal guardian. At age 16, Mike Tyson officially had no living biological parents left in the world, but for the first time in his life, he had a man who said, "You're going to be champion every day," and actually believed it. And for a kid who had never been believed in by anyone, those words weren't a prediction, they were oxygen. D'Amato taught Mike the signature peekaboo style he had developed over decades: hands high against the cheeks, chin tucked, constant head and upper body movement, nearly impenetrable defense, then explosive counters from blind angles at a speed the opponent couldn't even see. But more important than any technique, D'Amato taught Mike how to control his rage, turning it from chaos into a weapon, from self-destruction on the Brownsville sidewalks into purposeful destruction in the ring. D'Amato was the only one who could control the monster he himself was creating. While D'Amato was alive, Mike had discipline, structure, limits, someone to be afraid of disappointing, someone whose look of disappointment on his face Mike would rather get knocked out than see. Mike won gold medals at the Junior Olympics in 1981 and 1982, fought as an amateur with a 24-3 record, and on March 6, 1985, at age 18, stepped into the professional ring for the first time in Albany, New York, knocking out Hector Mercedes in the first round. D'Amato stood behind the ropes that night, watching his creation begin to walk the path he had already drawn. Then 8 months later, November 4, 1985, Cus D'Amato died of pneumonia in a Catskill hospital at age 77. Mike was 19. The little boy had just been orphaned for the 3rd time, first losing his biological father because the man chose to leave, second losing his mother because she no longer had the strength to stay, third losing the only person on earth who understood him because fate would not let him keep anyone long enough. And this third loss was different in nature because, with his biological father, there was at least someone to be angry at. With his mother, there were at least memories to hold on to. But with D'Amato, there was only a void that no one on earth could fill. Not because there weren't skilled people, but because there was no one who was at once father and teacher and compass and reins for the beast that he himself had trained to kill. Kevin Rooney, D'Amato's assistant trainer, took over the role, but Rooney was a technician, not a father. And the distance between those two things is the distance between a controlled champion and a destruction machine with no brakes. Mike Tyson's life, from this point, split into two completely different chapters. The chapter with D'Amato and the chapter without D'Amato. And everything that happened after November 4, 1985, Robin Givens, Don King, Indiana prison, the Holyfield ear, cocaine, bankruptcy, Bengal tigers, the wheelchair at the airport. All of it is the consequence of a question no one could answer. What happens when you create the most perfect weapon in boxing history and then take away the only person who knows how to drive it? Without D'Amato, the machine D'Amato created still ran at a speed the heavyweight division had never seen. After the debut knockout of Hector Mercedes on March 6, 1985, Mike Tyson won 15 fights in his first year, 13 of them by first or second round knockout, meaning most of his opponents stepped into the ring and 90 seconds later were lying on the canvas trying to remember what had just happened. It wasn't that they were weak. Many of them were experienced professional fighters with heart and records, but they had never faced this. A 19-year-old kid weighing 220 pounds who moved with the speed of a middleweight, punched with power that former champion Larry Holmes later described as like being hit by a truck, and looked into his opponent's eyes with a gaze that had nothing behind it but complete emptiness, the eyes of a man who feared nothing, because he had already lost everything worth being afraid of losing. Then on November 22, 1986, at the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas, the night D'Amato had prophesied when Mike was still a 14-year-old kid hitting the heavy bag in the Catskill gym. Tyson stepped into the ring against Trevor Berbick, the Jamaican WBC heavyweight champion, 33 years old, who had gone 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali in Ali's last fight. In the second round, Tyson threw a left hook followed by a right uppercut. Berbick went down, tried to get up, legs shaking, staggered to the left, went down again, tried to get up once more. Legs wouldn't obey, went down a third time. Referee Mills Lane stopped the fight, and Mike Tyson, 20 years, 4 months, and 22 days old, became the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history, breaking the record Floyd Patterson set in 1956 at age 21. That record has stood for nearly 40 years and will probably never be broken, because to break it, you need a 20-year-old kid who is just crazy enough, just gifted enough, and just hurt enough to knock out a world champion, and that combination doesn't appear twice in history. The orphan kid from Brownsville, the kid who was bullied for being fat and stuttering, the kid who was arrested 40 times before age 13, now wore the gold belt around his waist, and the whole world was afraid when they heard his name. D'Amato had been right, but D'Amato had been in the ground for a year and never got to see it. The speed of domination continued to increase exponentially. On March 7, 1987, Tyson defeated James Bonacrusher Smith by unanimous decision after 12 rounds to claim the additional WBA title. Then on August 1, 1987, he technically knocked out Tony Tucker after 12 rounds to seize the remaining IBF belt, officially unifying all three WBC, WBA, and IBF heavyweight titles, the first person in heavyweight boxing history to do so, at the age of 21. From then on, Tyson defended the titles 10 times in a row, crushing every opponent like a meat grinder with no off switch, stopping Tyrell Biggs by TKO in the 7th round, stopping former champion Larry Holmes, who had held the heavyweight title for 7 years with an undefeated streak of 48 fights, by TKO in the 4th round in January 1988, then stopping Tony Tubbs by TKO in the 2nd round in Tokyo in March, and then the absolute peak on June 27, 1988, at Convention Hall in Atlantic City. Tyson faced Michael Spinks, the undefeated lineal heavyweight champion with a record of 31-0, a man who had never tasted defeat in his professional career. The fight lasted exactly 91 seconds. Tyson threw a right hand to Spinks's body. Spinks went down for the first time, got up, and Tyson finished him with a right uppercut that left Spinks lying flat on his back, motionless on the canvas, while referee Frank Cappuccino counted to 10, and the entire arena had not yet had time to sit back down in their seats. 91 seconds, the shortest unified heavyweight title fight in history. Spinks was no weak fighter, no tune-up opponent. He was an undefeated champion, and 91 seconds was all the time he got before lying on the floor. Tyson's record at this point, 35-0 with 31 knockouts, a KO percentage near 90%. At age 22, the kid from Brownsville was not a champion. He was a natural disaster, and people paid money not to see who would win, but to see how long anyone could survive. But 1988, the most glorious year of Mike Tyson's career, the year of the 91-second knockout of Spinks, the year of title defenses against Holmes and Tubbs, was also precisely the year when everything outside the ring began to crack beyond repair. In February 1988, only 4 months before the Spinks fight, Tyson married actress Robin Givens, a marriage that would last exactly 8 months before exploding into the biggest television scandal of the decade. In March 1988, Jimmy Jacobs, Tyson's longtime manager, the man who controlled the finances and protected him from those seeking to exploit him ever since D'Amato's death, died of leukemia at age 58. The void left by the guiding figure D'Amato had left behind now became a black hole. And Don King, the most notorious boxing promoter in America, the man with the upright hair and the reputation for swallowing the finances of every fighter who ever signed with him, stepped into that black hole with a contract ready in hand and the smile of a man who had just found an unguarded gold mine. Married Givens in February, Jacobs dead in March, knockout of Spinks in June, Don King taking over in the summer, all in the same year, 1988. The greatest year and the year the collapse began were the same year, the same person, the same body simultaneously knocking out everything inside the ring and being knocked out by everything outside it. The world saw the undefeated champion at 22, the fastest fists on the planet, the most perfect body heavyweight boxing had ever touched. The world did not see the 22-year-old orphan being surrounded by predators from every direction, without D'Amato, without Jacobs, without anyone trustworthy enough to put a hand on his shoulder and say, "They do not love you, they love your money, and you have to know how to tell the difference before it is too late." In September 1988, on the ABC program 2020, hosted by Barbara Walters, and what happened in those 15 minutes of live television that night would become one of the most haunting moments in the history of American sports. Media. Mike Tyson and Robin Givens sat side by side on the sofa in their mansion in Bernardsville, New Jersey. Tyson had his arm around his wife's shoulder, the undefeated heavyweight champion, 22 years old, record 36-0, having just knocked out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds 3 months earlier. Givens, the 23-year-old actress, star of ABC's Head of the Class, who had married Tyson in February of the same year after 5 months of dating, began describing life with him in front of Walters and millions of viewers. "He has a frightening side. He cannot control his anger. He shakes, pushes, swings his arms, and recently I have been truly afraid." Tyson sat motionless, no reaction, rebuttal, no removal of his arm from his wife's shoulder. The heavyweight champion of the world, the man the entire planet feared, sat still as a statue while his wife told millions of people that life beside him was hell, that he was manic. The word Givens used, and Michael had no choice but to sit there because the kid from Brownsville knew how to knock out every opponent in the ring but did not know how to answer, when his wife destroyed him on national television. After the cameras were off, Tyson flew into a rage and threw a chair against the wall, and Givens filed for divorce immediately afterward. The marriage lasted exactly 8 months. Givens maintained she was a victim of domestic violence, and she may have been right. Tyson, in his 2013 autobiography, Undisputed Truth, maintained that Givens and her mother, Ruth Roper, exploited him for money, that they were ruthless, and he may also have been right. The truth lies in the gray area that no one outside the two people involved truly knows. And this script does not judge who was right or wrong because what matters more than the legal truth is the human truth. At age 22, Mike Tyson earned hundreds of millions of dollars, owned mansions, cars, championship belts, the fear of the entire world. But there was no one, not a single person, who taught him how to love, how to trust, how to distinguish between real love and exploitation wearing the mask of love. D'Amato taught him how to throw the perfect uppercut. No one taught him how to recognize when the person sitting beside him wanted to be with him and when they wanted to be with his money. And when that void needed to be filled by someone with experience, with wisdom, with the ability to protect the orphan kid from his own naivety toward the world outside the ring, Don King stepped in. King, 57 years old, hair standing upright like a personal commercial logo, a criminal record of manslaughter conviction in 1966 for beating a man to death on a Cleveland street, the most powerful boxing promoter in America, the man who had promoted Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, and also the man accused by every fighter who ever worked with him of stealing money. D'Amato, while still alive, had warned Mike to stay away from King. He hated King and knew exactly what King would do to the kid if he were no longer there to stand in the way. But D'Amato had been dead 3 years. Jimmy Jacobs, the loyal financial manager, had just died in March 1988 of leukemia. And the two replacement co-managers, Bill Caton and John Horn, pushed Tyson straight into King's arms. When a child loses a good father, he seeks a bad one, not because of stupidity but because of desperation, and King knew how to turn that desperation into a contract. King took up to 50% of Tyson's income from purse money and television deals, put his wife Henrietta King and their children on the list of consultants in Tyson's team, draining hundreds of thousands of dollars each year for each of them, and earned at least $65 million from percentages of purse money and casino deals alone, not counting the millions more from international television rights and expenses he charged to Tyson's account. In 2004, Tyson sued King for $100 million, accusing King of systematically stealing money from him for more than a decade. The case ended in a $14 million settlement, equal to 14% of the amount he claimed was taken. And the settlement figure itself said everything about the power imbalance between an orphan kid without a trustworthy lawyer and a promotional empire with a legal team thicker than Tyson's knockout list. Estimates of Mike Tyson's total career earnings range from $400 to $700 million. The exact figure depends on which source you believe, but whichever source you believe, the conclusion is the same. Most of that money went into other people's pockets before Mike even understood where it had gone. And the money Mike managed to keep, he burned in the way only someone who grew up in extreme poverty burns, because when you grow up with nothing, then when you have everything, you buy everything, not because you need it, but because you are afraid of going back to having nothing. A 52-room mansion in Southington, Connecticut, 21 bedrooms, 25 bathrooms, a private nightclub, indoor swimming pool, recording studio, basketball court screening room, bought for millions, sold to rapper 50 Cent for $4.4 million when he went bankrupt. 3 Bengal tigers named Kenya, Storm, and Boris, each $70,000, total $140,000, plus $200,000 a year in food for 3 animals that ate 40 pounds of meat a day, plus $125,000 a year for a dedicated trainer. Kenya lived with Tyson for 16 years, sleeping in the same room with him, before biting off the arm of a neighboring woman who climbed the fence into the grounds and forcing him to give all 3 to a wildlife sanctuary. $240,000 a month for clothes and accessories, Versace shirts, custom leather jackets, gold chains, diamond rings. $173,000 in a single day at a jewelry store in Las Vegas. Rolex watches, diamond bracelets, gifts for people he met for the first time and would never meet again. $300,000 a year just for lawn care and landscaping of the mansions. More than $300,000 a year for limousines, not renting but maintaining a private fleet. And $400,000 for pigeons, the same species of bird the kid in Brownsville raised on the roof of a crumbling tenement, the same species of bird that a kid had wrung the neck of in front of him and triggered the first fight of his life, now raised in gold-plated cages at the Las Vegas mansion by the richest man in boxing. The same love, the same gentleness that Brownsville never allowed the kid to anyone except those birds. But now that love was wrapped in gold instead of dirt. Outside the ring, everything had collapsed. The marriage shattered, Don King sucking blood from every fight, money flowing out faster than it flowed in, and the orphan kid filling the emptiness inside with tigers and gold and limousines because no one had shown him any other way. But inside the ring, Tyson remained undefeated, 37-0. The world still believed that Iron Mike was invincible, that no one born on this planet could defeat the machine. On February 11, 1990, at the Tokyo Dome in Japan, Mike Tyson stepped into the ring against James "Buster" Douglas with a record of 37-0 and betting odds of 42-1 in his favor, meaning the bookmakers believed Douglas had a 1 in 42 chance of winning, which in practical terms meant that no one on the planet, including Douglas's own team, truly believed the fight would last beyond 4 rounds. Many Las Vegas casinos even refused to take bets because the outcome was considered a foregone conclusion. But Douglas, 29 years old with a record of 29-1, had lost his mother just 23 days before the fight and fought with the recklessness of a man who had nothing left to lose. He punched, moved, maintained distance, controlled the pace of the fight with a left jab that was longer than Tyson's by a full handspan, and did what no one had ever done before: forced Tyson to fight past the 4th round. In the 8th round, Tyson knocked Douglas down with a right uppercut, and the entire Tokyo Dome believed the familiar script was playing out again. But Douglas got up at the count of 9, and from the 9th round onward, he fought like a man returned from the dead. In the 10th round, Douglas unleashed a 4-punch combination: left hook, right cross, left hook, uppercut, and Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet, the undefeated champion, the embodiment of fear itself, was on the canvas. Not lying motionless in the cold knockout style, but in an image even more painful than that. Tyson crawling on the floor, his right hand groping for the mouthpiece that had been knocked out, picking it up, trying to shove it back into his mouth with trembling hands, while referee Octavio Marin counted to 10. The undefeated champion crawling on the floor of the Tokyo Dome, looking for a piece of plastic, in front of 30,000 spectators and tens of millions of television viewers worldwide. And for the first time in his career, the kid from Brownsville did not get up in time. This was the first loss of Mike Tyson's life. This was the greatest upset in the history of heavyweight boxing, perhaps the greatest in the history of world sports. And this was the moment the invincible legend died, and the real human being inside, the orphaned boy without a compass, without D'Amato, without anyone, began to be revealed for the whole world to see. But the world had not yet seen everything. 17 months after that Tokyo night, in July 1991, Mike Tyson went to Indianapolis to attend the Indiana Black Expo, a cultural event for the African American community, one of whose affiliated programs was the Miss Black America pageant. Desiree Washington, 18 years old, a college student and the reigning Miss Black Rhode Island, met Tyson at a pageant rehearsal around 2 a.m. On July 19, Washington went to Tyson's room at the Canterbury Hotel, and 3 days later she went to the emergency room at Methodist Hospital and reported that she had been raped. The trial began on January 27, 1992, before Judge Patricia J. Gifford in Indianapolis, with Special Prosecutor Gregory Garrison facing defense attorneys Vincent Fuller and James Voiles. Tyson took the stand and insisted the encounter was consensual. Washington took the stand and described the assault. The jury deliberated for nearly 10 hours. On February 10, 1992, exactly 2 years after the night he lost to Douglas in Tokyo, a coincidence of brutal precision, the jury found Tyson guilty of rape. Judge Gifford sentenced him to 10 years in prison, suspending the final 4 years, so that he would effectively serve 6 years with the possibility of early parole. Tyson was taken to the Indiana Youth Center, a prison in Plainfield, Indiana, in April 1992 at the age of 25. Because of the conviction, he had to register as a Level 2 sex offender under federal law, a legal brand that could never be erased, following him to the last day, no matter what he did afterward. Tyson has always maintained his innocence. In his 2013 autobiography, Undisputed Truth, he wrote, "I did not rape Desiree Washington. She knows that, God knows that, and the consequences of her actions are something she has to live with for the rest of her life." Appellate attorney Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor, argued the case before the Indiana Court of Appeals in February 1993, but the court upheld the conviction by a 2-1 vote. During his 3 years in prison, Tyson converted to Islam, took the name Malik Abdul Aziz, read the Quran, read philosophy, read Mao Zedong, read Alexander Dumas. The high school dropout from Brownsville began to educate himself inside the 4 walls, where the outside educational system had failed him. Monica Turner, a pediatrician he had met in 1990 at an event hosted by comedian Eddie Murphy, visited him every 2 weeks throughout the 3 years of his sentence, driving from Washington, D.C. to Plainfield, Indiana, every single time without missing one. On March 25, 1995, Mike Tyson walked out through the barbed wire fence of the Indiana Youth Center at 6:16 a.m., wearing a white skull cap embroidered with Islamic patterns, and went straight to a mosque where he prayed and had breakfast with Muhammad Ali, the legendary heavyweight champion, also a Muslim, also a black man punished by the American justice system. The world believed Mike Tyson had changed, that prison had repaired what Brownsville had broken, that Islam had filled the void D'Amato had left behind. The world was wrong. After his release, Tyson returned to the ring and knocked out Peter McNeely in 89 seconds in August 1995, a fight that sold 1.55 million pay-per-view buys, proving that even after 3 years in prison, Mike Tyson was still boxing's money-printing name. In March 1996, he knocked out Frank Bruno in the 3rd round to regain the WBC heavyweight title, returning to the championship after 6 years, a comeback moment HBO promoted as the return of a fallen angel. In September 1996, he knocked out Bruce Seldon in the 1st round to add the WBA title. It seemed the machine was running again. But in November 1996, Evander Holyfield stopped Tyson by TKO in the 11th round to take the WBA belt, the second great shock of Tyson's career, because Holyfield was the underdog and older. Yet he fought with a courage that Tyson's power could not destroy. Then came the rematch on June 28, 1997, at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, before 16,000 live spectators and tens of millions of pay-per-view viewers worldwide. The night that would become the most infamous event in the 200-year history of modern boxing. In the 2nd round, Holyfield and Tyson clashed heads. Tyson suffered a cut over his right eye, blood flowed, and he believed Holyfield had deliberately head-butted him, as he had in the first fight. In the 3rd round, Tyson did not throw punches, he bit. He bit Holyfield's right ear, severing a crescent-shaped piece of cartilage about 1 inch long. Holyfield leaped up in pain, and the piece of ear fell onto the canvas. Referee Mills Lane deducted 2 points and allowed the fight to continue. Then Tyson bit Holyfield's left ear a 2nd time, and Lane disqualified him. The Nevada State Athletic Commission suspended Tyson's boxing license and fined him $3 million, 10% of his $30 million purse for the fight. The ear-biting was not the act of a champion who lost control in a moment of rage. It was a symptom of the collapse that had been unfolding for 12 years since the day D'Amato died. D'Amato had taught Mike how to transform anger, the anger of the Brownsville kid who was bullied, abandoned, treated by the world like trash, into a deliberate weapon in the ring. Without D'Amato, the anger lost its purpose and reverted to its original form, pure chaos, uncontrolled violence. The screaming child inside the adult body, and that chaos, before hundreds of millions of television viewers worldwide, looked exactly like this: a 31-year-old man biting his opponent's ear like a cornered animal. If the night he knocked out Berbick on November 22, 1986, was the moment the world saw the genius D'Amato had created, then the night of June 28, 1997, was the moment the world saw what happens when that genius loses the only person who knew how to keep it intact. The distance from youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history to the man who bit his opponent's ear on global television was 11 years. After the ear-biting night, Tyson continued to fight, but the machine was broken. The remaining fights were a list of decline: a knockout of Francois Botha in the 5th round in January 1999, but nearly disqualified for trying to break his opponent's arm; a return to prison in February 1999 for assaulting 2 motorists after a traffic accident in Gaithersburg, Maryland; sentenced to 1 year, actually serving 9 months at the Montgomery County Detention Center; release, a TKO win over Andrew Golota in the 3rd round that was later changed to a no contest because of a positive marijuana test. On June 8, 2002, in Memphis, Lennox Lewis, unified WBC and IBF champion, 6'5", with a reach 10 inches longer than Tyson's, knocked Tyson out in the 8th round. And this was not Buster Doug-style shock. This was the result everyone had seen coming, and it was precisely that seeing it coming that hurt. The world already knew Mike Tyson was finished before Mike Tyson knew. Then the final fight on June 11, 2005 at the MCI Center in Washington, D.C. against Kevin McBride, an Irish fighter with a 32-4-1 record whose name no one outside the McBride family knew. Tyson was 38 years old, weighing over 220 pounds, slow, exhausted, and after the sixth round he sat on his stool in the corner and refused to get up, refused to leave the corner, refused to continue. The referee stopped the fight and Mike Tyson told reporters, "I don't have the heart for this anymore." Iron Mike, the man the entire planet once feared, admitted he was finished. His professional career ended. 50 wins, 6 losses, 2 no contests, 44 knockouts. But being finished in the ring was only the beginning of the abyss outside it. Because when you take the ring away from a man who only knows how to exist in the ring, you take away his reason for existing, and that void has to be filled with something, and what Mike Tyson found was cocaine. Tyson was heavily addicted to cocaine for many years, and admitted he had used it before, during, and after many of the biggest fights of his career, using a device called the Wizinator, a fake penis containing clean urine from someone else, to beat every drug test. And when you have to attach a fake penis to your body at a global sporting event just to be allowed to step into the ring, you are not a recreational user. You are a prisoner of the substance, and that prison has no release date. In December 2006, Scottsdale, Arizona, police stopped Tyson's BMW for weaving, saw him wiping white powder off the dashboard, found bags of cocaine in his pants pocket and in the car, his speech slurred and incoherent. When the officers asked how often he used, Tyson answered, according to the report, with the calm of a man who had hit bottom, "I use whenever I can get it." Charged with drug possession and driving under the influence, he pleaded guilty, was sentenced to 24 hours in jail and 15 days of community service, then voluntarily entered a rehabilitation center in California. In 2013, he told ESPN, "I almost died. I was a brutal alcoholic." On the Hot Boxin' podcast years later, he revealed that cocaine and alcohol had completely destroyed his sexual function for many years. He lived in fear that his wife would leave him because he could not perform the most basic function, and he did not understand why until he stopped cocaine and everything returned. D'Amato had taught Mike how to transform anger in the ring, turning pain into punches, turning fear into speed. But no one taught Mike how to transform the pain outside the ring, where there is no opponent to hit, no referee to stop the fight, and the only punch you throw is the one you throw at yourself. In August 2003, Tyson filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in federal court in Manhattan, $23 million in debt, including $13.4 million owed to the IRS. The man who had earned an estimated $400 million over 20 years. Forbes once estimated the figure as high as $685 million if off-ring income was included. Now had a net worth of less than zero. The 52-room Connecticut mansion was sold to 50 Cent for $4.4 million. The Bengal tigers were donated to a sanctuary. In 2010, Tyson returned to ABC's The View, sitting across from Barbara Walters, the same interviewer who had watched Robin Givens destroy him on live television 22 years earlier. The same chair, the same camera lenses, but no mansion, no championship belts, no Robin Givens, nothing left. And Tyson looked Walters in the eye and said, "I'm broke, destitute." The man who once spent $240,000 a month on clothes now sat on a daytime talk show chair and admitted he didn't have enough money to pay the electric bill. Then came the thing that no bankruptcy, no cocaine, no prison could compare to. On May 26, 2009, at a house in Phoenix, Arizona, Exodus Tyson, 4 years old, the daughter of and his girlfriend Sol Xochitl, born March 3, 2005, was found by her 7-year-old brother Miguel, with her neck tangled in the cord of a treadmill. Sol performed CPR. The ambulance arrived. Exodus was taken to St. Joseph's Hospital and Medical Center. She died the next day. Mike was in Las Vegas when he got the news and flew to Phoenix immediately. On Oprah Winfrey's show that same year, when asked about his daughter's death, Tyson said, "I don't know how she died, and I don't want to know." Monica Turner, his second wife, who had visited him every 2 weeks for 3 years in an Indiana prison, told the New York Times, "That changed Mike forever. There is nothing more to write about Exodus. No metaphor fits. A 4-year-old child, a cord, a morning in Phoenix. This was not a fall caused by bad choices, not cocaine, not infidelity, not gambling. This was pure tragedy. No one was at fault. No one could have prevented it. And there is no forgiveness that can heal it because there is no one to forgive. You cannot forgive a treadmill cord. You can only go on living or not, and between those two choices lies an abyss that no one can help you cross except yourself. Tyson was lying on the floor of life, not the boxing ring where the referee counts to 10 and you can get up before the count of 9, but the real floor. Addiction, bankruptcy, the loss of a child, the loss of a career, the loss of himself. Not one knockout, but dozens, one after another for 15 years, from the Tokyo Dome in 1990 to the house in Phoenix in 2009. Most stories end here. Most people end here. But Mike Tyson, the kid from Brownsville, did not. In 2009, the same year he lost Exodus, the same year the bottom of the abyss reached its deepest level, Mike Tyson began a vegan diet and voluntarily entered rehab, where he stayed for more than a year. There was no divine moment of enlightenment, no dream in which God told him to change, no light at the end of the tunnel shining down at just the right time. Only a 43-year-old man who had just buried his 4-year-old daughter, sitting in a rehab room among other addicts, and for the first time in his life surrounded by people who wanted nothing from him except that he survive. He described the experience in an interview with Graham Bensinger in 2011. I met a group of interesting, energetic people who cared about me as a human being. The rehab world is almost a utopia. Everyone is happy, positive, and has the attitude of we're going to win. Everyone has a painful story, but they're getting through it. For a man who had spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted his money, Don King, his fame, the entourage, his body, boxing, or to destroy him, the media, a room where no one wanted anything except his recovery was the closest thing to unconditional love he had ever received since D'Amato died. He quit cocaine. He quit alcohol. He said on the show Below the Belt with Brendan Schaub, I stopped cocaine and drinking. Everything changed. I completely changed my life. But, and this is where Mike Tyson's redemption story differs from every neat redemption story Hollywood likes to tell, he was not clean in the absolute sense. Tyson quit cocaine and alcohol but switched to psilocybin mushrooms, Sonoran desert toad venom containing the hallucinogen 5-MeO-DMT, and ayahuasca, admitting in an interview with Interview magazine that he had smoked dried toad venom 80 to 90 times, even sharing the experience with his adult children. He called it his own way of meeting God, not through the Bible or a church, but through a chemical extracted from a desert toad. And if that sounds bizarre, perhaps you have never had to look for God after walking through Brownsville, an Indiana prison, cocaine, bankruptcy, and the coffin of a 4-year-old daughter. He founded Tyson Ranch, a farm and legal cannabis brand in California, selling marijuana while claiming to be in recovery, and that contradiction is not hypocrisy but the nature of a man who was never taught perfection and does not pretend to be perfect. Tyson's path of redemption is not a straight line. It is a zigzag with setbacks and progress, good days and bad days, and it is precisely that messiness that makes it more honest than any I found God and completely changed story. And at the center of that mess, holding everything from completely falling apart, is Lakeha Kiki Spicer. Kiki first met Tyson when she was 18, coming to watch one of his fights with her father, Shamsuddin Ali, a Muslim community leader in Philadelphia. Years later, they began dating, and before they married, Kiki was sentenced to 6 months in federal prison for participating in a money laundering scheme involving her father's organization. She discovered she was pregnant with Tyson's child about a week before going to prison and gave birth to their daughter Milan right after being released. They married in June 2009, just days after Exodus's funeral, and the timing itself tells a story. The man who had just buried his daughter married the woman who had just gotten out of prison. Two people with stained pasts finding each other in a place where no one else wanted to stand, and perhaps that is exactly why they understood each other. Not because both were perfect, but because both knew what the floor smelled like when you were lying on it. Kiki is not a redeeming angel fallen from the sky. She is an ordinary woman with a federal criminal record. And perhaps that is exactly what Mike needed after Robin Givens and Monica Turner. Not someone perfect, but someone real enough to stay when the worst of everything had been exposed and there was nothing left to hide. Tyson credits Kiki with saving him from addiction. The marriage has lasted more than 17 years as of now. longer than his 2 previous marriages combined by a factor of 4. 2 children together, Milan, born in 2008, and Morocco, born in 2011. Mike Tyson has a total of 7 children with 4 women. Mikey Lorna Tyson, born in July 1990. His first daughter with Kimberly Scarborough, a plus-size model who lives quietly away from the spotlight. Ramsey Tyson, born in February 1996, a child with his second wife, Monica Turner, non-binary, a film production graduate of New York University. Amir Tyson, born in August 1997, also with Turner. Miguel Tyson, born in 2002 with Sol Xochitl, now a musician and involved in charity work. Exodus, born March 3, 2005 and died May 26, 2009, Milan and Morocco with Kiki. Tyson admits that his children have changed him in a way that no rehab, no philosophy, no desert toad ever could. He said, "I have daughters. I can't be the person I used to be. Everything must change." Milan, the youngest daughter, is pursuing a professional tennis career, training with coach Patrick Mouratoglou, former coach of Serena Williams, and launched her own sports fashion brand Milan Mila in 2021 at just 13 years old. Speaking to Oprah in 2009, "I am lucky to have children with many different women, and as a family we stick together. That is my greatest asset. We all love each other." Jimmy Kirkpatrick left when Mike was 2 years old and never returned. Mike Tyson stayed with all 7 of his children. Even when he was addicted, even when he was bankrupt, even when he was in prison, he did not leave. The boy without a father ultimately became the father who did not leave, and that loop, absent father, determined present son, is not dramatic, has no tearful reunion scene after 20 years of separation, but it is real, and sometimes real is more important than dramatic. In 2013, Tyson published his autobiography Undisputed Truth, written with Larry Ratso Sloman, brutally honest about every mistake, every sin, every weakness. Every time he crawled on the floor looking for cocaine at 3 a.m., every time he lost money, lost people, lost himself. No asking for forgiveness, no explanations, just telling. Then he turned the book into a one-man stage show, Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth, touring 36 cities across America, standing alone on stage with no props, no supporting actors, just a microphone and the story of his life, telling thousands of people things that most human beings would take to the grave rather than ever say out loud. Then the podcast Hotboxing with Mike Tyson, becoming one of the most famous podcasts in the world, where Tyson discusses Nietzsche's philosophy, spirituality, death, with an honesty that only someone who has lost everything can have, because when you have nothing left to lose, you have no reason left to lie. In an interview with Loaded magazine in 2024, Tyson said, "And this is perhaps the most mature sentence the boy from Brownsville has ever spoken in 58 years on Earth. I still have battles with my mental health, but luckily I have better tools. I have learned a lot from the process of being a former addict. I understand the triggers and the reasons I self-destruct. When I am honest with myself and do an internal inventory, I feel great." Tyson does not claim he is healed. He says he is managing. And the difference between those 2 words is the difference between someone pretending to be perfect and someone truly mature. Then the strangest thing in Mike Tyson's story happened, not in the ring or in rehab, but on the big screen. In 2009, the same year Exodus died, the same year he married Kiki, the same year he entered rehab, Tyson appeared in the comedy film The Hangover, directed by Todd Phillips, standing next to a Bengal tiger in the living room of Caesar's Palace, singing Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight in a high-pitched voice, and becoming one of the most beloved cameos in Hollywood cinema history. The film grossed $467 million worldwide, and suddenly, Mike Tyson, the man the whole world looked at with horror 12 years earlier when he bit his opponent's ear on live television, became someone the whole world looked at with affection, and that transformation happened so fast that no one stopped to ask, how could the same person be both the greatest fear of boxing and the most lovable comedy character in Hollywood? From The Hangover, Tyson walked straight into popular culture in a way no boxer before him had ever done. The animated series Mike Tyson Mysteries on Adult Swim from 2014 to 2020, where he voiced an animated version of himself, solving mysteries with a team that included a talking pigeon and the ghost of the Marquess of Queensberry, the father of modern boxing rules, And the fact that the pigeon is the main character in Mike Tyson's animated series says more about the real man than any fight. The podcast Hot Boxin' with Mike Tyson ran from 2018 to 2024, accumulating hundreds of millions of views on YouTube, with a guest list from Eminem to a neuroscientist, where Tyson discusses Nietzsche, death, psilocybin, pigeons in a high-pitched voice and unfiltered honesty that only someone who has lost everything can possess. But the paradox is that both images, the terrifying Iron Mike and the lovable Mike Tyson, are masks, and neither sees the Brownsville boy standing somewhere between those two images, still raising pigeons, still stuttering when emotional, still carrying every wound that neither fear nor laughter could heal. Then the ring called again. On November 28, 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, at Staples Center, Los Angeles, Mike Tyson, 54 years old, 15 years after his last professional fight, stepped into the exhibition ring against Roy Jones Jr., 51 years old, former four-division champion. 8 rounds, each 2 minutes, the result a draw, but the result was less important than the image. Tyson at 54, body still ripped, punches still fast, still moving with the peekaboo instinct that D'Amato had programmed into his nervous system 35 years earlier. And 1.6 million people bought the pay-per-view at $49.99 each, generating more than $80 million in revenue, to witness what no one thought possible. Iron Mike could still make viewers hold their breath at an age when most former fighters are in wheelchairs or lying in bed with CTE. Then in November 2024, Tyson agreed to a professional fight, not an exhibition, with Jake Paul, the 27-year-old YouTuber turned boxer, at AT&T Stadium, Arlington, Texas, streamed live on Netflix. Tyson 58, Paul 27, a 31-year age gap. But before the fight took place, the body that D'Amato had turned into a weapon nearly killed its owner. In May 2024, on a flight to Los Angeles, Tyson vomited blood in the airplane bathroom, then collapsed on the floor. Doctors discovered a 2.5-inch stomach ulcer that was bleeding. He had to be rushed to the hospital, received 8 blood transfusions, lost half the blood in his body, dropped 25 pounds. And when he asked the doctor if he was going to die, she did not say no. She said, "We have treatment options." The fight was postponed from July to November 2024. Tyson still fought, lost by unanimous decision after 8 rounds, looking old, looking slow, looking like a 58-year-old man who had nearly died 5 months earlier, because that is exactly what he was. The fight drew 65 million concurrent views on Netflix, the largest streaming sports event of all time. Tyson earned about $20 million. And right after the loss, he wrote on X, "I almost died in June. Had to get 8 blood transfusions, lost half my blood and 25 pounds in the hospital, and had to fight to get healthy enough to fight. So I won." That last sentence, "so I won," is not the denial of reality by a loser, but the truth of someone who had fought death before fighting Jake Paul and knew that the real victory was not on the scorecard, but in the fact that he was still standing here, still breathing, still alive. In September 2025, Tyson announced an exhibition fight with Floyd Mayweather Jr. 2 legends, combined age nearly 108, originally scheduled for the Democratic Republic of Congo in April 2026, a place that evokes the rumble in the jungle between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman in 1974, but postponed when Tyson broke his right hand in training in early 2026, now moved to fall 2026 with no specific date yet. At nearly 60, arm in a cast, sciatica recurring, stomach ulcer not fully healed, Mike Tyson still signed the fight contract. The world asks why. The answer lies in the Brownsville apartment rooftop, where the boy raised pigeons 45 years earlier. That boy never knew any other way but to fight. And when you only know one language, you speak that language until there is no breath left to speak. In 2011, between 2 lives, after the champion's life and before the artist's life, Mike Tyson was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, an official acknowledgement that despite prison, despite Holyfield's ear, despite cocaine and bankruptcy and everything Mike Tyson had done to Mike Tyson himself, he was still one of the greatest fighters the human race had ever produced. 50 wins, 44 knockouts, 6 losses, 2 no contests, in 58 professional fights spanning from 1985 to 2005. And those numbers, unlike everything else in Mike Tyson's life, no one can take away. Mike Tyson has suffered from sciatica since 2022, which forced him to sit in a wheelchair at Miami Airport and walk with a cane, a 2.5-inch stomach ulcer that nearly killed him in May 2024, with 8 blood transfusions and half the blood in his body flowing out before doctors could patch it, a broken right hand while training for the Mayweather fight in early 2026. The same body that once knocked out Trevor Berbick in 2 rounds and Michael Spinks in 91 seconds, the same hands once called the fastest destructive weapons in heavyweight boxing history, now wrapped in plaster and unable to clench a fist. On a podcast in 2022, Tyson said, in a calm voice that only someone who has hit bottom enough times to no longer fear the bottom can have, "We are all going to die someday. When I look in the mirror and see those little spots on my face, I think, wow, my expiration date is getting close, very close." That sentence is not maudlin, it is calm. And that calm weighs more than any lament because it comes from a man who has stood up too many times to still fear lying down. Mike Tyson is not a fairy tale. He was convicted of rape and served 3 years in an Indiana prison. He was accused of domestic violence by his first wife on national television, and the gray area between Robin Givens' accusations and Tyson's denials still exists after 38 years. No one outside the 2 people involved knows where the truth lies. He bit his opponent's ear in front of hundreds of millions of viewers. He burned through $400 million on tigers and mansions and limousines and cocaine, then went bankrupt with $23 million in debt. He was addicted to cocaine for years and used a fake penis to beat doping tests. He is not a pure victim. He was a participant in his own destruction, with both hands, at a speed only Mike Tyson could achieve. But he is also the boy abandoned by his father at 2 years old with no memory of a father to hate. The child who lost his mother at 16, lost the only teacher he had at 19, thrown into the world with giant fists and an empty heart that no one, not Don King, not Robin Givens, not the boxing industry, not the media, no one stopped long enough to teach the boy how to live without fighting. He is the father of 7 children with 4 women, and stayed with all of them, even when addicted, even when bankrupt, even when in prison. Because Jimmy Kirkpatrick left when Mike was 2, and Mike decided, though he never said it out loud, that he would never be Jimmy Kirkpatrick. He is the man who lost his 4-year-old daughter to a treadmill cord on a May morning in 2009 in Phoenix, and still found a way to get up the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning since. He is the man willing to sit in front of a podcast microphone, in front of a camera lens, in front of millions of people, and tell every mistake, every weakness, every darkness inside him, not asking for forgiveness, only asking to be understood. He is all of those things at once, in the same body, and anyone who says a human being cannot hold both a monster and a frightened boy inside themselves has never been to Brownsville. Cus D'Amato looked into the eyes of the 14-year-old boy from Tryon Reformatory in 1980 and said, "That is a champion." He was right, but only half right. Mike became a champion. But a champion also needs to know how to live when no longer wearing a belt, needs to know how to love without destroying, needs to know how to exist in silence without needing the bell for round 1 to know who he is. That part, D'Amato never got to teach. He died too soon, and 77 years of his life were not enough for the boy who needed him most. It took 40 years. 40 years of prison, addiction, bankruptcy, losing a child, losing marriages, losing himself. 40 years of crawling on the floor, looking for a mouthpiece in front of the whole world. For Mike to teach himself the rest. Biological father left in 1968. Mother died in 1982. D'Amato died in 1985. Jimmy Jacobs died in 1988. Don King stole tens of millions of dollars. Robin Givens described life with him as hell in front of millions of viewers. The jury found him guilty. Buster Douglas knocked him out in Tokyo. Holyfield knocked him out twice. Lennox Lewis knocked him out in Memphis. Cocaine nearly killed him. Bankruptcy took everything. The treadmill cord took exodus. The world took turns, cheering, then crushing, then cheering, then crushing. And after all, after everything life could throw at a human being, the nearly 60-year-old man sits at home in Henderson, Nevada, next to Kiki, the wife who has been by his side for 17 years, longer than anyone except D'Amato, talking about death with a calm smile, talking about his children in a gentle voice, talking about pigeons with eyes that the Brownsville boy would not recognize because those eyes have no fear behind them. The world created Iron Mike, the destruction machine, fear in human form, the pure symbol of violence. It took 60 years for Mike to find Michael again. The boy from Brownsville, the boy who raised pigeons on the apartment rooftop, the boy who stuttered and no one listened, the boy that Customato saw before the world saw anything but the fists. And perhaps for the first time in 60 years, that boy finally does not need to fight anyone to feel safe. When you look back at Mike Tyson's journey, what lingers? The 91-second knockout, the night of the ear bite at the MGM Grand, the wheelchair at Miami Airport, or the calm smile in front of the microphone when talking about death? Share your answer in the comments, not for this video, but for the boy from Brownsville who spent 60 years finding his way home. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next stories. Each story is a life, and every life deserves to be told to the end. Thank you for staying until the last minute. See you in the next video.